So, what was it like? What were the vibes of early Blizzard like? They've at this point Warcraft 1 and 2, Warcraft 3 is in production, StarCraft. These are legendary games. I spent probably over 1,000 hours in these games combined. I played Warcraft 1, 2, 3. I played StarCraft 1 and 2. I played WoW, of course, Diablo 1, 2, 3, 4. But you Diablo 2 with Stay a While and Listen with Deckard Cain.
Stay a while and listen.
I mean, some of these characters, some of these experiences just will stay with me forever. Anyway, so big thank you to those early Blizzard folks. What was it like? What was the team like? What were the developers like? What was the vibes like in those early days?
It was amazing. It was the dream. When I showed up at Blizzard on my first day, the office was on the University of California Irvine campus at the time. They have this research and development park where if you're like a tech company, you can get office space there. And Blizzard took up, when I joined, it was 3/4 of the building was Blizzard. And there's like a building right next to it that had like Cisco and, it was like all kind of techie places. And it was so funny because you drive up and like everything was very serious and corporate. And then outside of the Blizzard offices, everybody's wearing black t-shirt and shorts and throwing frisbees and playing hacky sack and on scooters and skateboards. And you're like, okay, that's where Blizzard is. So it was that environment. I remember walking in the door and thinking like it feels like I'm walking into a dorm room because it was just posters on the wall, and there were actually like people would have futons because they'd be sleeping because we would work so much back then. But the vibe it was very small. Like Blizzard, the day I joined in May of 2002, was fewer than 200 people. And that included, there was a whole group up in San Mateo called Blizzard North. So Blizzard South, the Irvine group, was responsible for StarCraft and Warcraft. And there were two development teams at Blizzard. It was called Team 1 and Team 2 at Blizzard South. Team 1 was revered. These are the RTS guys. They made, StarCraft, Warcraft 2, and they were, at that time, they're working on Warcraft 3. Team 2 was kind of the redheaded stepchild. Like, apparently, before I joined, they had tried to spin off a second team multiple times and failed. And then they finally decided they were going to make World of Warcraft. There was a game called Nomad. I don't know what that game was exactly, but that was what Team 2 was working on at first. That got scrapped, and Alan steered the team towards World of Warcraft. And there's an amazing designer named Eric Dodds. He'd go on later in his career to be the game director of Hearthstone. Him and Ben Brode basically were the core designers behind that. But Eric and Kevin Jordan were these two key designers working on World of Warcraft for Team 2. And then you had this tech group that was headed up by John Cash. And John Cash, the first day that I showed up to work on Team 2, they said, you have to go get your login from John Cash. I'm like, John Cash from id. And, John Cash has a skin. You could be John Cash in Quake 3. So, and then he saw me, and he was a huge EverQuest player. And he was like, you're the guy who runs Legacy of Steel. I'm like, you're John Cash. And we had that moment where we kind of fanboyed out on each other. And it was just, the vibe was so cool there. Like, there were very few producers. So a game team, there are 5 core disciplines that make a video game. You've got engineers or programmers who are writing the code. You've got the art team that's making all the visuals for the game, and that spans everything from like 3D modeling, characters, environments, to also animation, tech art, making it all work. You've got game design, which some companies don't have design. The artists and the engineers do it. Valve famously has very few designers because everybody there is a designer. But in companies where design is a discipline, which it very much is so at Blizzard, game designers are sort of the creating the game experience people, setting up all the systems and content in a way that gets the player to navigate through the game.
So that's part of his story, part of this quest design, part of it is like how you move through the game world.
Yes. So game designers, there's a spectrum, like same with art, same with engineering, of roles within game design. Some are more heavy on the system side. So like any game that you've played where loot drops, Diablo 4, World of Warcraft, Escape from Tarkov, whatever. If there's loot dropping, a designer has planned out very carefully what drops where and at what percentages. That would be like a systems designer. A content designer is somebody who's going to make quests or write storylines, or there might even be a narrative designer, which is even more focused on story. But designers, run the gambit, and then you've got these jack of all trade designers that can do it all. So that's the design group. There's production, which is project management. And production is different at every game company you go to. So if you talk to someone from EA or Blizzard, production might be very different. They might be the boss. They might actually be a designer, or they might be more of a project manager. And then one of my favorite disciplines on a game team that's often overlooked is sound and, audio, which is comprised of the sound designers and composers. And there are two things, I think there are two things that no one realizes how much they bring to a game until they're missing, and that's audio and lighting. Because most of the time we're playing without these things, and it just feels a little off and wrong. And when you have a great lighting artist, or you have a great composer or sound designer, the experience, you're just tapping into these senses that you wouldn't otherwise. But that's who comprises the game team.
As the lighting, all the different kinds of graphics, would that be under the art team?
Yeah, lighting, you're going to have lighting under the art team, but they're going to be best friends with a graphics programmer.
Okay.
And, like I mentioned with design, there's this wide spectrum. On the engineering team, you have some guys who are like architectural geniuses who are coming up with, the server client model or the networking or whatever. Others are more like gameplay focus. On Overwatch, we had an audio programmer just doing nothing but audio hooks for the audio team. And on every game team, you're going to have graphics programmers who will work with people like the lighting artists or the environmental artists, character artists on shaders, and basically any way to make the game. They'll always ask, what's your vision? What are you trying to get it to look like? They'll want an illustration of what should the world look like. And they'll be the ones who say, I know how to write code that will let you do that. So you partner a great graphics programmer with a great lighting artist, and that's actually the creative tension behind games. And what makes game teams so unique is if we were to line them up on some crazy spectrum, on one end, you're going to have the artists who they're creative, dare I say, emotional, they are artistes on that end. And on the other end, you have the most logical, brilliant programmers who their minds just work very differently from the most creative art. Like artists could be sitting, you have a meeting with them and they'll just sit illustrating. If there's any piece of paper, they're drawing on it. Um, and programmers, they're just so brilliant and organized in their thinking, and everything's so logical. And then in the middle are people like the sound designers, the game designers, and the producers. They're kind of a little bit in all those fields, but it's the brilliance of taking people who are so vastly different in their interests and talents, but aiming them at that shared goal or that shared vision of the game that like really makes something special.
And there, I mean, you showed me the size of the team for World of Warcraft, but you've also are well known for working on quite small teams to create these incredibly huge games. What is the power of a small team in this kind of context where there's that creative tension? Is it because a small team avoids maybe the compartmentalization, like the modular, where the artists now have their own wing building where they never talk to the engineers, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The bigger the team, the more you become a cog in the machine.
Hmm.
And on a small team, the way I like to describe it is you get to have a loud voice.
Hmm.
If we're a small team, let's say we're going to make a game and it's at sort of the incubation period of a game and there's only 10 of us, all 10 of us are in the room for every decision. I'm not a server networking guy, but I'm in the room for that discussion. I'm not an illustrator, but I'm going to sit in the room when we decide what the art style looks like. As soon as the team starts to grow, we become compartmentalized.
Hmm.
It's exactly like you said. And there's a weird thing that happens. This is just kind of a human nature thing. The less you interact with somebody, the more you sort of become alienated from them and vilify their point of view.
Hmm.
You tend to look at what they do and say with skepticism
Hmm.
rather than trust and belief in them. And I find on smaller teams where we all know each other's names, I know what everybody's working on every day, they know what I'm working on, everybody can talk to each other. There's none of that stereotyping
Hmm.
of a discipline. On big unhealthy teams, you start to say things like, well, the artists just don't get it. They
Hmm.
don't understand what we're trying to make. And when you back up and you think about the statement that you just said, it's like such an asshole statement. Like, really, all the artists don't get it? Like, that's A, that's not true. B, that's sort of demeaning to them. Like, they signed up for this is their life's work too.
Hmm.
This game is going to be as much theirs as it is mine. So who am I to say a statement like that?
Yeah, it's harmful to a discipline to think that you understand the world and those silly other folks don't, and you have nothing to learn from them really, and they're deluded in some kind of way. That's so powerful.
Fast forwarding a little bit, when we formed Team 4, and which went on to make Titan and ultimately fail, and then that got rebooted as the Overwatch team. The idea that I tried to get through to the team was to make an assumption. And really, like, Blizzard is one of the top game developers in the world. And we were very fortunate when I was there, and I imagine it's this way today, that we could recruit whatever talent we wanted. The best of the best wanted to come work at Blizzard. And if you sort of go through the paces of that and say, okay, when we recruit somebody, let's say we're recruiting an artist to make props,
Hmm.
boxes, chairs, whatever. That is the best prop artist in the industry. That's who's going to show up on our doorstep. So when they show up here, we should treat them like the best prop artists in the industry instead of starting from a place of doubt and cynicism. So when that person speaks up and says, I think, like with Overwatch, for example, I think we should do this, we should do X instead of Y. Instead of saying, well, I'm a believer in Y, why are you against my idea X? You should take a moment, have a deep breath, and say, man, the best prop artist in the industry is suggesting something. Why don't I listen to it?
I actually do for myself like this kind of thought framework or thought experiment whenever I'm talking to a new person, especially if I feel in myself a little bit tinge of that feeling. Usually it happens with like a really young person, like an undergraduate student or something like this. I pretend that they're the smartest person in the world in my head. And then now, like, it puts me in the mode of like assuming I have a lot to learn from them. And it helps. You actually like really listen. I literally think they're the smartest, wisest human on earth. It helps me.
I had that, like, I think, I'm no expert. I'm a game designer, so, like, as much psychology as I know is how to manipulate people into having fun, hopefully. Like, I don't know. I don't have an important job, but
Yeah, right. What's
psychologically
fun?
speaking, one thing I think a lot about is ego, and I think about insecurity. And insecurity we all have, like all of us as human beings have insecurity. It just manifests itself in different ways.
Mhm.
And as we kind of go through our life journey, the insecurity also changes. So, like some people, for example, use their insecurity to rip other people apart. Some people destroy themselves through their own insecurity. Some people destroy everybody with their insecurity. But I had that moment as a young lead when I first was made a lead on like World of Warcraft, where I felt it was very important to be right and to, be shepherding the correct idea. And I actually got pulled aside. Like Pardo and I had a meeting with a couple people who weren't game designers. And it's always tricky as a game designer because constantly everybody's throwing ideas out on a game team. Like there's no shortage of ideas ever. And we were in some meeting about something and these people kind of threw out these ideas and I wasn't mean to them, but I very kind of systematically like an insecure, you know, ego driven new lead would do. I kind of, well, let me tell you why that's wrong and let me tell you what we're going to do instead. And after the meeting, Pardo pulled me aside and he said, "You're a very smart designer, but you shouldn't do what you just did to those people. You should always listen to what people have to say and try to make their ideas work." And I just, over and over, I was like, okay, anytime an idea comes my way, let's try to make it work. And it went from this kind of thing that I didn't believe into to actually like a core part of who I am today as a leader, as a game designer, as a game director. And some of the best ideas have come from developing other people's ideas
Mhm.
where your first reaction is like, no, that's wrong. And then just kind of sticking with it and going, but how could we make it work? And the most gratifying part when it succeeds is they get all the credit. And you've sort of elevated this person whose idea wouldn't have been championed, whose idea by the insecure, egotistical lead of, early 2000s would have just said no. Now their idea is the thing everybody in World of Warcraft or Overwatch is just loving,
Mhm.
and they get all the credit.
I should give context to the listener who don't know about the great Jeffrey Kaplan. That you're one of the most humble and always give credit to the team for everything and anything. And so everything we talk about today, I know you're probably resisting constantly giving credit to the team on everything. Uh, you're the famous "Hi, I'm Jeff" from the Overwatch team, right? So just as a small aside, thank you for your humility um, through your career, and thank you for always celebrating the team.